Someone once said, live free or die. Right? Bill Martinez, live.
Welcome back. 28 minutes before the top of the hour. Bill Martinez here. For more information on the show, you can go to BillMartinezLive.com. A lot has been said about mail-in voting. The president sent out a warning saying, look, this really opens up to all kinds of fraud. And whenever you talk about voter fraud, those on the left have a narrative that would say that it doesn't exist. In fact, our former attorney general, believe it or not, looked into the camera years ago and said there's no such thing as voter fraud. Quite shocking, because even the Heritage Foundation, which is a site linked on our website at BillMartinezLive.com, you can check on it for yourself. And this isn't all, but this is quite the documentation of people who have been arrested, serving time in jail, and clear circumstances or clear examples of voter fraud that's happened in our country today. Now, there are 6 shocking reasons that your vote may never be counted. And our next guest, Craig Huey, an old friend of mine from electionforum.com. I say old friend not because he's old, it's just that we've known each other for so long. He's still a very young man. Hey, Craig, how you doing, buddy?
Great, Bill. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing terrific. Thanks for coming on the show and breaking this down for our audience, because there's such misinformation. You talk about the misinformation project that's done by whether it's the Chinese or the Russians, but I would say even people within our own country that would want us to believe that somehow mail-in voting is nothing we should worry about.
You know what? We've all got to be very concerned about the legitimacy of this upcoming election. We could find there's hundreds of thousands, maybe over 1 million ballots that are never delivered, and there's a number of reasons why, Bill. But here's the thing. We live in a time where the politicians, the pro-socialist, secular Democrat politicians, have mailed out ballots to every registered voter on voter registration lists that have duplicate names, people who have died on those lists, people who have moved away on those lists, just names that should not be on that list. They've mailed out to some households multiple ballots.
Exactly.
And this is supposed to be an election that's fair, and it's turning out to be one that probably will end up in the courts.
Yeah, there's just too many questions. And starting off, first of all, I mean, Craig, since I've known you, you've been involved with, marketing, whether it's direct mail, social media, that sort of thing. And I've explained to people, being a businessman myself and involved, not to the degree that you have, but enough to be dangerous, I guess, in realizing that we know that every year, roughly 20%, of humanity here in America moves out of the zip code. So how do you do that? So that 25% of the addresses you have just to begin with are not good. Not to mention the fact that here you've got these governors on a dime because of COVID, we can use that as an excuse, have put an inordinate amount of pressure on the U.S. Postal Service, which we already know is strained already. And now we're going to say, hey, we want you to move millions of ballots through the mail, get them to their assigned places there and back again. Boy, this is an incredible amount of pressure, and it's not like logistically we've said to the U.S. Postal Service, well, we're going to double your budget in order to make this happen. I mean, you got what did they get? Like a 2 weeks notice or something like this?
Well, here's the thing. I think there's 2 things to consider here. First of all, I'm saying this based upon the fact that I'm an owner of an ad agency, and my ad agency has mailed out over a billion direct mail pieces using the post office. Mm-hmm. So we study this daily as far as how fast the delivery is and how many pieces are lost in the mail. Yeah. And so the first thing we got to consider is this, that the postal monopoly is bureaucratically driven. It is $65 billion in debt. It can't make reforms because of the unions. Bill, it's an absolute disaster. And so we see that you can have 2-3% of the first-class mail never is delivered. And it's because of the bureaucracy, not politics. It's just bureaucracy. And then you add the second element to that, and that is how bad the voter registration rolls are, and complicated by the fact that the pandemic, more people have moved. People have moved in with their parents. People have moved out of different places. The voter rolls are not kept clean. No. And so multiple ballots arrive, and ballots that go to homes where somebody can pick it up. Mm-hmm. And Bill, you're familiar with the issue of ballot harvesting?
Exactly, very much so. What happened in California and about, I think, 4 or 5 other states as well.
Oh, yeah. See, ballot harvesting is legal in 28 states.
Now 28 states?
In 28 states, and it's done in at least 40. Mm-hmm. And so let me explain what it is to the listeners. A ballot harvester can pick up multiple ballots. People have to sign it. They have to seal the envelope, and then the ballot harvester can take it to the voter registration office. Well, this has opened up the potential of voter fraud like never before, and no accountability as to who delivers the ballots. Mm-hmm. No tracking of who these ballots are from. Somebody could get multiple ballots, fill them out, and give them to the voter office as mm-hmm. a harvester. Nobody knows who that person is. It's filled with potential corruption. You can go to a nursing home, pick up the ballots, fill them out, take them in, and so the accountability is horrible. And
well, we're seeing clearly, to your point, Craig, mm-hmm. what's happening in Ilhan Omar's district. Veritas captured on video an operative there, and he said, "Oh, I've got a car." I mean, you saw him; he had hands full of ballots that they had targeted, retirement homes. To your point, exactly. Yes. And he's got all these. He's got a car full of ballots.
Ballot harvesters can bring in maybe 500 to 1,000 ballots. Mm-hmm. And that's why the ballot harvesting is something that's so dangerous. Not voter fraud, but can lead to voter fraud. It should be outlawed. But I got to tell you, Bill, Christians, conservatives, and libertarians and Republicans have said enough is enough. We got to start learning how to do ballot harvesting ourselves. And
they're doing it. Yes, exactly.
And they're doing it. Mm-hmm. But in the state of California, which is one of the ballot harvesting states, get this, the Attorney General of the state of California and the Secretary of State are filing a lawsuit against churches and the Republican Party for doing ballot harvesting boxes. So one of the things that every church in America should do where it's legal to do it for ballot harvesting is the church should tell the people, bring in your ballots, and the pastor will deliver them to the voter registration office. And so 300 churches in California are doing that. The Secretary of State and the Attorney General is sending police to all the churches to try to intimidate them to take down those boxes. And it's voter suppression of the Christian vote, and it's really horrific politics that's going on there right now. But Bill, if you're in the state of Oregon or Illinois or Florida, you can do ballot harvesting, and if you had 15 to 20 large-sized churches doing ballot harvesting, you could transform the city, the county, the state, and the national election in that geographic area if those churches did ballot harvesting. It can be used for good.
Yeah. Well, look what happened in California. 7 districts, I believe, in the midterms got flipped in one voting cycle. Craig, as long as you've been studying this, you know the only way that they could flip in one voting cycle was because there was chicanery going on. It wasn't a legitimate vote. It was all because of ballot harvesting. Go ahead. I'll tell you what, we got to go to break. We'll hit the pause button. We've got more from Craig Huey right after this. Stay with us.
Bill Martinez live.
Hey, welcome back. 14 minutes before the top of the hour, my good friend Craig Huey continues with us. Craig and I, to give you a little bit of background, we first met in Southern California, where I was based at. I was born and raised in Southern California. And you were too, weren't you, Craig?
Yes, I grew up all my life in California and moved this year.
Yeah, so now you're hanging with the Nashville Cats, are you?
I am out here in the Nashville area in the free state of Tennessee.
Yes, amen. Well, it was one of the areas that we looked at as well. But anyway, going back to our history, when I first met Craig, I was just so enthralled because his organization was focusing on voter integrity. We had so many people within the church not voting their values. Didn't know. They weren't voting their values. They didn't understand what the platforms were. And it's amazing since then, Craig, how definitive and what a clear delineation the platforms of the two parties has become. But even with that clear delineation, you still have people of faith voting against their values. It's like, wait a minute, you say you're a Christian, but you're supporting a political force that believes in abortion? I mean, to me, that's just I can't get into the second step. But for some people, they're willing to look past that and still take a look at the Democratic Party that also disavows any relationship and association with God. They took God out of their platform. Years ago, I remember another Los Angelino who was the mayor at the time, was leading the charge. And if you remember at that convention, just kind of rammed it through. They were going to disavow God, and they tried to take a voice vote, and he made a executive decision that the voice vote editing God out of their platform passed, which it wasn't even close. I mean, the people didn't want it, but the mayor thought different. The people didn't know, and went ahead and excised God out of their platform.
Absolutely amazing, the differences, and instead of looking at personality, instead of looking at tweets and looking at past history, what as Christians we need to do. What people who are nonpartisan, people who are have a more of a conservative worldview, people who are families, people who are business owners, people who are retired. What they need to do is look at the policies. And when we think about policy, I'm thinking in terms of certain non-negotiables. From a biblical standpoint, to me, the defense of Christian liberty in light of how many attacks the government and society has had against our religious freedom. The idea of a non-negotiable of protecting the unborn, a non-negotiable of having a Supreme Court judge. It might be one of the number one reasons is a Supreme Court judge that is going to vote as a strict constructionist, not a judicial activist that legislates from the bench. A non-negotiable of protecting Israel and protecting the persecuted church and protecting tax exemption for churches and protecting homeschooling and Christian schools. These are some of the things that are far more important than other issues or personality. And they, to me, I call them a non-negotiable because when I take a look at the pro-socialist Democrats, they're on the wrong side of every one of these issues. And for people to decide how to vote, I always say you need to vote for, not against your values.
Exactly.
Yet we find in the church's bill, close to 35 to 45% of the people are not registered to vote. And then out of those who are registered to vote, less than half vote. And then we take a look at what's happening with let's just say the Biden campaign and the Democratic Party right now. They're spending close to $50 million to reach evangelical Christians and conservative Catholics with special messages about their Christianity, whether Christians should vote for Joe Biden and the Democrats.
Right.
Well, that's completely voting against your values.
Exactly.
And historically, Donald Trump got 81% of the evangelical vote in the last election. Right now, he's at 79%. the evangelical vote, 60 million evangelicals. That's a huge voting bloc.
Right. Well, you imagine if they come out, and we need to have them come out in record numbers. I mean, the idea that only roughly, you say 35, 50%, I've heard as high as 50% of evangelicals actually bother to register, and then half of that, again, actually go out and vote. And this is really unacceptable. I mean, even as people of faith, and by God's command that we need to render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, to God the things that are God. And meanwhile, God has called us into this dark world to be, light barriers. And if we're not carrying the light of truth out to a dark world, then we're offending God. But for some reason, people, I'm frustrated with Donald Trump's tweets. Joe Biden, he doesn't know if he's fracking or flicking or whatever he's doing. I said, well, look, it's up to us. This country started on Christian principles. I mean, we talk, a lot of times we talk about the forefathers, but we really stop in the 1700s. We really go back to the early 1600s when it was the Pilgrims themselves who bent a knee before God and said, God, please give us this opportunity to come to a country where we could worship and honor you. And the only way that can continue is that people of faith have got to join with the Pilgrims of the 1600s with bent knee and humble hearts coming to God and saying, God, save this country, and to do their part. We just cannot sit there in the pews and think that it's a one-way street. We're called to be activated and to be catalysts in this dark world.
Absolutely. Let's just take one policy, that of Israel. With the issue of Israel, we've had the United Nations at U.S. taxpayers' expense fighting against Israel, undermining Israel. We have the Palestinians at U.S. taxpayers' expense fighting against Israel. We had enemy countries all around Israel threatening Israel. This is the first time the UN has been defunded and stopped from U.S. taxpayer support of the attacks on Israel. It's the first time the Palestinians have had money and negotiations removed as long as they are attacking Israel. President Trump has moved the Tel Aviv embassy to Jerusalem, where it should be. He's opened up the Golan Heights and other areas that should be Israel's territory, and he's created a historic peace process where countries that were Israel's enemies have signed a peace treaty. It's amazing what's happened with Israel, but the Democrat in Congress, in Senate, and Biden's and Harris team, they are supporting. They did not support the move of the Tel Aviv to Jerusalem embassy, and they have also supported UN and the Palestinians.
Exactly.
This is just wrong.
Well, Craig, I'll tell you, there's at least 5 other Arab countries standing in the wings right now, getting ready, and I believe they would have signed on already had there been unanimity or even support from the Democratic side. But what they're waiting for right now, I believe, is to see if America will come under new management after this election. And but if Donald Trump is reelected, then get ready. I mean, you've got already 2 Arab nations that are aligning and doing something about this long-desired Middle East peace. We'll have 5 nations before that, and we'll start seeing the reality of what our good friend Bill Salas has written about for years, and that's the fulfillment of Psalm 83.
Yes.
That's exciting, huh? I mean, here we are.
So exciting.
Yeah, we're on the eve of all this stuff. I mean, the spiritual impact is so significant right now that Christians should not worry in doing good, that we need to be faithful to the call that God has called us to. We need to activate our citizenship. This is why we're here right now. I mean, of all places in the world that you could be at, for a time such as this, God has you here in the United States of America to be part of the solution, to save this country, to maybe help us realize another Nineveh moment, quite possibly, and that revival would fall upon this land in such a way that it would be clear that it is by the hand of God, that is not by Donald Trump, it's not by Nancy Pelosi or any political figure, but by God himself.
Yes. awesome, Bill. That is so right. And really, every listener has the ability of friends and neighbors to be able to influence this election. In regards to these non-negotiables we talked about, in regards to Israel, in Genesis 12, it talks about, I will bless those that bless thee, I will curse those that curse thee. Christians and must join with conservatives and Republicans and independents and Democrats who realize that we've got to be a people who look at policy, not personality, and that this election, we've got to vote our values. And we got to, in those states that you can ballot harvest, get your grandkids, get your daughter, get your son, get your neighbor, get your friends and churches. We've got to be able to pick up those ballots of people who normally wouldn't mail them in or go to the poll. We can do something to be able to help bring up the vote count. Otherwise, what's down the road is going to look very dark, and it's going to have negative consequences on not only the economy, but I believe so much more from a spiritual aspect as well.
Oh, without a doubt. I believe the spiritual heart and soul of this country hangs in the balance with this election. His new book, Voting by Mail, 6 Shocking Reasons Your Vote May Never Be Counted. That book is available at all the usual places. Am I saying that correct?
That is correct. Amazon or ChristianVoterBook.com.
And the website, real quick. We got 5 seconds.
Yes, electionforum.org. Electionforum.org.
Mr. Craig Huey, thank you, buddy. Take care.